Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everyone joining us live and to those who will be watching the recording later. Welcome to the 9th BRICS conference organized by BRICS from the University of São Paulo. My name is Luana Paris and I'm a researcher at the BRICS study group. I'm honored to serve as
Good
the
morning, good
moderator of this
afternoon, good evening
panel,
to everyone joining
which will
us live
focus
and to
on
those who will
peace,
be
security,
watching the
and
recording later.
cooperation in the new
Welcome to the
global
9th
order.
BRICS conference organized by
It's a
BRICS
great
from the
pleasure
University of São
to
Paulo.
welcome
My
our
name is Luana
distinguished
Paris.
speakers, Pedro Loher, Mohamed Arafa, Davi Okpatuma, and Professor Fulu Netswara. Before we begin, I'd like to thank our sponsors and partners who made this event possible, especially Ibrachina and our supporters, Martins Vilac Advogados and Ligue de China. For those following us on YouTube, you find the attendance form in the comment section. So if you'd like to receive an official certificate for participating in this conference, please make sure to fill it out. And also feel free to use the comment section to share your questions and thoughts for our speakers. We'll do our best to include them during our questions and answers moment here. So on behalf of the BRICS, thank you all for joining us today. And I hope you enjoy and take some inspiration from this important discussion. So to begin our panel, I will introduce you to Pedro Loher. So he is an international relations analyst with a degree from the Belo Horizonte University Center and currently a master's student in Chinese history at Southeast University in Chongqing. With a strong interest in Asian history and culture, he has served as youth director of the Minas Gerais Association of Japanese Brazilian Culture and represented international students in tourist promotion campaigns in Chongqing province. Pedro also earned second place in the Rongcheng Global Governance Cup, organized by Fudan University, and his opinion pieces have appeared in the People's Daily, the official media outlet of the Chinese Communist Party. He is also a member of the Soyu Institute's Chinese Brigade, contributes to Espetinho Internacional, a platform for international relations dissemination, and co-hosts the podcast Southwest is Red, which explores these issues such as imperialism, Marxism, and security in the global South. So, Pedro, welcome. So, the floor now is yours.
Thank you, Luana. Well, I would like to thank the organizing committee for inviting me, for being here today, for giving me this opportunity to talk especially in such an special edition of the BRICS conference. So let me share my presentation with you. Right. Can everyone see it? Okay. So I would like to start by talking about the three major teachings in China. Okay, a brief overview. Confucianism, Taoism, and Buddhism. These three current of thoughts, they are essential to understand the Chinese and, in some extent, Asian philosophy. Okay, even though each one of them they see the world, they frame the world in a different way, they all have some aspects in common, and it's about one of those aspects that I want to talk with you today, the millennial concept of Tiyong. And like before I start, I would like to apologize in advance for my tones in Chinese. Okay, I'm practicing, but I hope you can understand. So, what is the essence function principle? T stands for the essence, the substance, and Yong would be the function, the application. The application. Okay. In a metaphorical sense, we could say that T is the root, okay, and Yong its branches. As I said before, the concept was used as an interpretation tool in both Confucianism and Taoism, and it was later used to adapt the Buddhist teachings and philosophies to a Chinese reality. We can see this principle as a way for the Chinese to interpret what is core and what are the functions of a given theory, of a given approach. Okay? And of course, it's natural that a concept like this one have influenced political thinking. No, during the late Qing dynasty, the last Chinese dynasty, while China was struggling against foreign invasions, imperialism, occupations, robbery, destruction, a century of national humiliation, a group of reformers, they tried to apply this philosophy to save the imperial dynasty, to save the country, let's say. At the time, the concept was interpreted as Chinese learning as the substance, Western learning as the application. And, well, the objective was to keep the reigning structure, to keep the Chinese logic at the time, and use the Western functions. So the Chinese ethics, the Chinese culture would would guide the modernization. And at that time, they wanted a very specific kind of modernization. The Western weaponry, the military technology, the same weapons that were used to destroy them at the time. Well, those reforms, they ultimately failed to deliver the expected results, but the concept didn't die or didn't vanish because of that. And then, more than 100 years later, during the 80s, the philosopher Lisa Ho, he inverted the logic. He reinvented the concept. So Western learning became the substance, and Chinese learning became the application. And this is important, and it's a bit strange at first, right? Because when you see like Western learning as a substance, you think like, well, so they want to abandon what is Chinese, what is the Chinese learning, what is the Chinese culture, and well, actually, this they tried to do that in the early 20s during the May 4th movement. A group of reformers, they tried to abandon Chinese learning, Chinese culture, even the Chinese language, to advocate for Western learning instead. But that is not what Lisa Ho proposed. He, in the same way as the New Confucians a long time ago, he saw the Tiyong principle as indivisible. So you cannot separate the substance from the function, right? Let's go back to the tree, okay? You cannot separate the root, the main trunk of the tree, from its branches. In order to understand the phenomena, you need to analyze everything, right? So when he means Chinese application, he means the Chinese learning will guide the substance. The Chinese learning is the path and the manner to absorb and reinterpret the substance. And now I would ask that if everyone is understanding. I know it's a bit complicated. I know that, and trust me, it gets worse. And here's some more examples to clarify what is substance and what is application. Okay, culture, traditions, philosophies, ethnic identities, civilizational values. All of these would be the T, the substance, and while Young would be technology, modernity, economic models, institutions, diplomacy. And why am I saying all that? Why does it matters? Because I believe that in order to understand China, it's necessary to understand how the Chinese adapted the Western concepts in international relations to their reality. For instance, it can be said that the Chinese, they are pragmatic in the diplomatic sense, in the international relations sense, right? And at the same time, we cannot say that the Chinese, they see the world through the realist lenses, in the realism sense of the international relations, right? There is a difference there. Likewise, the political theory of the socialism with Chinese characteristics. Socialism with Chinese characteristics. The Chinese characteristics is there for a reason, right? This and the Tiyong principle, in my opinion, it's a good tool to help us to analyze all that. And I would like to talk about the Chinese way of building international relations too. Notably, China has a stark preference for cooperation over conflict. Let's take recent history as an example. The last major conflict China was involved in was during the late 70s amidst the Cold War tensions. in the recent years, China has studied and followed the rules, the essence of the Western world established after the Second World War. But the function, the application is Chinese. And this application is different in both theory and practice. So starting with the theory, let's go for the 5 principles of the peaceful coexistence, the core, the guiding points of the Chinese foreign policy. When we look at them, it's clear that they are all cooperative, they are non-interventionist in nature. That's the nature established in international relations by the People's Republic of China after the 50s. In the same way, the cooperation with the Global South in organizations, in movements such as the Bandung Conference in 1955, followed by the non-aligned movement, are all indicatives. Now the current partnerships with African and Latin American countries are all indicatives that the foreign relations of China, they follow a distinct logic. Like this meeting now from the BRICS group, it's also an indicative of that, right? And I would also like to add that even when it comes to the military thinking, going from the security aspect, the peaceful aspect, it persists. Recently, 2 PLA scholars, they released a study that I think it's quite pertinent for our conversation of today. The 3 stages of the peaceful rising, how they plan that China will rise to the global stage. The first one would be to secure a surrounding environment. That would be establishing strategic partnerships with countries like Brazil, Russia, India, okay? And by having a leading role in regional organizations, like namely ASEAN, the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, all in order to guarantee the Chinese sovereignty and integrity. The second stage, to mold a global security environment. Look, this is, and I believe that right now we are watching the transition from the first to the second stage. And by molding this global security environment, China knows that it will have to get more responsibilities and compromises in the international arena. And by the end of the second stage, China aims to regain the full control of its territory in a peaceful manner, as they say, important to note, and to expand the cooperation with major players, namely European Union, United States. The third final stage, it consists of devise and lead an international model suitable for everyone's needs. And I believe this stage is also linked with the idea of community of a shared future. This concept that was presented during the Hu Jintao administration back then, but is still present in the current administration, like quoting the current chairman, Xi Jinping, we are living in a world where countries are linked and so dependent on one another at a level never seen before. So to sum up, take the BRI, the Belt and Road Initiative, as an example. We can see that like the Chinese projects, the ones that are aimed outward, they can be beneficial for us, the BRICS countries, and the countries of the Global South too. And talking about the new prospects for us, for BRICS countries, for Global South countries, I would like to stress the defense cooperation, which is an important point. And let me be clear. Like when we talk about defense, when we talk about peace, actually, we should be prepared to ensure a peaceful future. We should be prepared for all kinds of scenarios, right? And I don't mean any warmongering or anything related with that. So the 2025, this year, September, it marked the 80th anniversary of the Chinese victory against fascism, the end of the Second World War globally. This victory, this important victory, was also a step further to end 100 of years of humiliation, as I said, and the Chinese, they got a lesson from that. They would never let their sovereignty be trampled on again. They would not let anyone invade their country or separate a part of their country again. And well, a lot of mainstream media outlets, they frame the parade as a show of strength, display of power. I like to put the things in a different perspective. Okay, I I don't think we should analyze again like with Western lenses, with a pure realist perspective. I see this parade in two ways. Okay, victory and a symbol of national sovereignty. Two things that we BRICS countries, we should strive for, we should aim for. Defense, peacekeeping, peace building are important aspects of international relations. And we should see things, these new technologies, new developments, as prospects for future partnerships and future cooperation. And of course, I'm not meaning that the BRICS will become a military alliance, such as NATO or something like that. That's not the point. But cooperation in defense is one of the core principles of the BRICS. It's been there since its foundation, talking about defense and talking about partnership. Well, and I would like to talk to about the Chinese approach to peacekeeping. Okay, and even though like the Chinese, they acquired, they displayed those capabilities, that doesn't mean they are applying them the same way. The Chinese participation in UN operations has shown that peacekeeping can be done in a more constructive manner. The UNTAC, the United Nations Transition Authority in Cambodia, for instance, is one of those examples. Even though the Chinese engineers, they accounted for almost 20% of the engineering corps at the time, the Chinese, the mission did more than just build infrastructure, as the Chinese are known for. They spoke with all the sides of the conflict, the warmongering factions, and likewise in Timor-Leste, they favored a more multilateral partnership, a more constructive approach. Instead of choosing unrestricted intervention, as we have seen in other cases regarding security, they based their approach in what they call the new security concept that advocates for peacekeeping limited to peacekeeping. That is to say, which means the country who is providing aid should not interfere in domestic dynamics or anything beyond establishing the end of hostilities. So maintain neutrality, uses of minimum force. That's what we see in Cambodia and in Timor-Leste. So to conclude my speech, I believe I spoke a lot. I mentioned various concepts, ideas, but the key point here is what the other BRICS countries and the Global South community as well, can we learn from this perspective, from the TION perspective? I brought this reflection today because I really believe that international relations, both in theory and practice, they are not fixed. The current set of rules that we have today in the global stage are far from being perfect, and in some sense, and some extent, they must be challenged in order to be improved. If we want to build a common future, a shared future, we should strive to learn from each other without imposing any kind of values based on some sort of moral or civilizational superiority. And we, from the global South, we are quite familiar with this kind of approach, right? The TION formula is a Chinese concept, but the battle for adapting, trying to fit in something that wasn't made for us, it is also something that is not strange for us all, right? We all have things to teach and things to learn, and we should adapt these new concepts according to our own realities. For me, that's the spirit of TION. That's what this philosophy from millennia, it's teaching us today. And thank you all. That's it.
Thank you so much, Pedro. You brought a lot of new information for me, and I'm sure the audience is also enriched by it. Thank you. So now I will pass the microphone for Professor Mohamed Arafa. He's an adjunct visiting professor at Cornell Law School, professor of law at Alexandria University, and visiting professor at IDP. He also serves as affiliate faculty with the Center for Security, Race, and Rights at the Rutgers Law School. His academic expertise lies in comparative law, constitutionalism, and international legal studies, with a career bridging scholarship and practice across multiple institutions. Professor, it's an honor to have you here. So now the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Luna. Can you hear me? Great. Thank you very much, Luna, for arranging this. I wanted to start with thanking the organizing committee and specifically Professor Paulo Cassel that he invited me for this. It was really interesting when I saw him 2 weeks ago, and he told me about the great conference, and he told me, "Oh, do you want to be a part of that?" And I said, "Yeah, why not? I would love to." And so once again, thank you for this. I deeply appreciate it. And Pedro, thank you very much for your informative presentation. I learned a lot from it. So I'll try to keep my remarks a kind of brief here, and because I'm wondering that you might have kind of questions on things when it comes to the Middle East, because I will focus on BRICS and national security in Egypt and the Middle East, and to some extent how that also play a fundamental role when it comes to the United States foreign policy in the region. As you know, it's important when it comes to the United States as a part of that, in terms of foreign policy in that region. So I think in recent years, the global order has been shifting from a unipolar world dominated by Western powers, specifically the United States, toward a more complex multipolar system. And one of the most significant developments in this transformation has been growing the influence of BRICS group in general, which is originally composed by Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. Initially conceived as an economic bloc of fast-growing emerging markets, BRICS has evolved into a major political and strategic force seeking to reshape international institutions and offer an alternative model of global cooperation. With its expansion to include various countries from the region as Egypt, Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates, Iran, and Ethiopia, it now extends deeply in the Middle East and North Africa, regions traditionally under the influence of Western power. So that was kind of a tricky point, specifically for countries that they have a very strong allies with the United States, based on the values of the dollars in the region. And for Egypt, there is a kind of wide-ranging implication for national security, economic sovereignty, and geopolitical strategy. So the BRICS project embodies a vision of international order rooted in balance, inclusivity, and sovereignty. Its members share a common dissatisfaction with the dominance of Western-led institutions, like, for example, the IMF or the World Bank and the G7. So you can say that as well. I think it's one of the main things here when it comes to that the BRICS group, to some extent, seeks to reduce dependency on the United States dollars and promote alternative pathways to development. Specifically, it will be a little bit complicated under the current administration when it comes to the tariffs implications, and we see that across all nations. Recently, there have been tariff punishments on Canada. Before we heard about Brazil, and now I think I'm not sure about what's going on in China. The president have a meeting, I guess, on Thursday with the president of China to see what's going to be happening. So I think this orientation towards multipolarity or polarity and South-South cooperation resonates strongly with Egypt's long-standing foreign policy tradition, which has often emphasized independence and non-alignment. And the current administration in the United States is kind of happy within the Egyptian administration. I mean, the president loves dictators, I think, across the Middle East, not only, I mean, across the world, actually. And actually, he was in Egypt recently, the president of the United States, for the peace treaty. Egypt's decision to join BRICS was driven by both economic and strategic considerations. Economically, Egypt faces persistent structural challenges, including high public debt, inflation, and dependence on external financial support, specifically when it comes to the European Union countries and the United States. So joining BRICS presents an opportunity to diversify the sources of funding and investment, especially through access to the new development banking there. It also will enable Egypt to engage in trade using alternative currencies, potentially reducing exposure to dollar fluctuations. based on the currency values right now and the inflation. And the conditionality is often attached to the Western financial aid. Also, BRICS membership strengthens Egypt's integration into a network of dynamic emerging economies that are reshaping global trade flows. So Cairo continues to maintain deep ties with the United States and Europe, specifically in the military cooperation and development assistance. Probably some of you know that Egypt received $1.3 billion annually as a military assistance by the United States every year as a part of to keep stability in the region and keeping based on the peace treaty between Egypt and Israel. So that's one of the main things that the United States investing every single year in Egypt. So the only two countries actually receive this military assistance every year by the United States Congress is Egypt and Israel. Yet by participating in the BRICS, Egypt signals a more balanced approach, one that seeks to engage multiple power centers rather than one single person. So I think that will also help Egypt geographically and political identity as a bridge between Africa, the Arab world, and the Mediterranean. So so it's a part of, because Egypt, I mean, within its, I mean, the geographical position of Egypt is within the whole that kind of area. Specifically when it comes to diversify its partnership in energy, technology, and defense. So the implication of BRICS membership for Egypt national security are a lot. In 21st century, national security extends beyond traditional concerns of military defense to encompass economic resilience, of course, energy security, technological capacity, and food stability. On the economic front, BRICS provides to borrow or trade in dollars currencies, for example, could help Egypt reduce exposure again to the fluctuation in global markets, and at the same time, closer economies ties with the BRICS, such as like kind of China, India, Russia can attract investment in infrastructure, agriculture sector, vital for long-term stability. And this is what we see right now within the expansion of the Russian infrastructure industry and the other Arab countries in Egypt, like the United Arab Emirates, Saudi Arabia. In addition to that, I think energy and resource security from another crucial dimension of this relationship. Egypt occupies a strategic location at the crossroads of global energy routes, particularly through the Suez Canal. And that's one of the main reasons, as you know, helps for processing growing natural gas reserves in the Mediterranean. And that's one of the main things, another part of national security that helped the United States to keep the stability in the region based on the Suez Canal and the crossing of the international navigations. So I think that will strengthen Egypt's role as a regional energy hub and enhance its kind of what we call bargaining position in the global markets. Technology and defense cooperation also feature a permanent and a significant part of the national security calculus. BRICS is not a military alliance, actually, as Pedro highlighted in his notes and remarks, and I think it will not going to be a kind of a military alliance, and I like how when he described it as not a part of the NATO or so. Several of its members are major defense partners and suppliers to Egypt. Russia has long been a source of the military hardware. China has emerged as a key partner in digital infrastructure and cybersecurity, in addition, as I mentioned before, to the military assistance that annually coming from the United States military. So the relationships offer Egypt access to advanced technologies and strategic diversification, and that will help in how Egypt will try to manage carefully to avoid any kind of antagonistic Western allies, particularly the United States, which remain a central actor in Egypt's security and Egypt foreign policy. In the broader geopolitical context, BRICS offer Egypt and the Middle East an opportunity to participate in shaping a new world order. For decades, the Global South has sought greater representation in international decision-making. Through BRICS, countries like Egypt gain a platform to advocate for reforms in global trade, finance, and climate governance. This inclusion enhances political legitimacy and allows regional actors to coordinate on issues such as food security, water scarcity, and counterterrorism, specifically fighting radical terrorism in the region, radical Islamic terrorism in the region to some extent, which represent the kind of challenges that directly affect social stability and national security. However, Egypt's engagement with BRICS also comes with challenges that block internal diversity, spanning democracies, autocracies, as we know, authoritarianism, and states with competing geopolitical interests. Additionally, while BRICS aspires to be an alternative to Western institutions, it has yet to demonstrate comparable financial capacity or policy coherence. Egypt must therefore navigate its participation pragmatically, using it as a complementary pillar of its national security. To conclude, Egypt's entry into BRICS marks a significant milestone in its quest for greater economic independence and strategic flexibility. The partnership offers valuable opportunities to enhance national security through economic diversification, energy cooperation, technological exchange, and diplomatic influence. For the Middle East as a whole, BRICS represents a potential avenue toward a balanced and cooperative regional order, less dependent on external power and more reflective of local priorities. Yet success will depend on how effectively Egypt and its neighbor can leverage this platform while maintaining constructive relations with traditional allies at the United States. The global order continues to evolve. Egypt's participation in BRICS is more than a symbolic gesture. It is a strategic recalibration to a world where power is increasingly shared and where national security not merely depends on military, but also on resilience, adaptability, and inclusive development. I will stop here and I look forward to your question. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Professor. This topic on Middle East is absolutely needed for talking about BRICS Plus. So thank you so much for bringing this to the panel. So right now I'm going to introduce you to our third speaker, that is Davi Okpatuma. He's a globally recognized youth leader, international development expert, and independent consultant with over a decade of experience in diplomacy, sustainable development, and public advocacy. He has built a distinguished career advancing cross-cultural diplomacy, youth empowerment, and strategic alliances across Africa, Eurasia, and beyond. And Davi's work spans international relations, policy innovation, and community development. He serves as a trusted advisor to governments, international organizations, corporations, and civil society partners worldwide. Thank you so much, Davi, for joining us, for accepting our invitation. So now the floor is all yours.
Thank you so much for having me today. Good morning. And I am in Moscow, so good evening from Moscow. It's been quite enlightening listening to the two previous speakers talk, and I would just want to take a slightly different approach because I cannot best their scholarly expertise, and I would just try to contribute from my experiences and some of my practices and my insights as it relates to the topic that I was given. So it's firstly a real honor to be here today, not just as a speaker, but also as someone who believes deeply in what gatherings like this represent. Spaces where young people, scholars, dreamers from different corners of the world come together to question the old order and imagine something new. I come from Nigeria, and as many of you would know, Nigeria is a country that has known both the power of resilience and the weight of division. And over the years, I've worked with young people through various initiatives like the Search for Common Ground's Niger Youth Unite. Niger is an argot name we use for Nigeria. So there was a project we called the Niger Youth Unite, and it was a peace-building initiative that brought together youth from across different religious divides, ethnicities, and political lines. And if there's one thing that I learned from that experience, it's this: Peace doesn't begin in conference halls or at the United Nations or any other institution. It begins when people learn to see each other beyond the lens of fear and difference. That sounds quite simple, but to be honest, it's quite revolutionary, especially for those who have taken time to be in the field and work in peace building. And especially in a world that often rewards suspicion more than trust. So now the topic of this speech is focusing on peace, security, and cooperation in the new global order. And it carries both promise and, to me, when I was thinking about it, it carries a little bit of confusion. Because let's be honest, the new world order isn't entirely new. It's more like an old system struggling to reinvent itself. We see power is shifting and the rules are being rewritten and new voices emerge daily, especially from the global south. And these voices from the global south are finally demanding a seat at the table, not just a mention in the footnotes. So, but what kind of order are we really building if we don't first address the disorder that comes within our own societies? So, I would always use Nigeria as an example because it's the country I know best. And it's the country I have the right to critique and make comments on. So in Nigeria, we saw how insecurity, for example, misinformation and inequality fueled mistrust between communities. So through our work with young people, we were able to create safe spaces for dialogues, meaningful dialogues, not just to erase the differences that exist, but to make them less threatening. And maybe that's the model the world needs right now, because global peace will not come from perfect agreements, but from learning how to live with disagreement. Of course, respectfully, constructively, and without violence. Africa definitely cannot walk alone. Latin America cannot walk alone in this strife. Even BRICS countries cannot walk alone in this. For all their collective potential, cannot thrive in isolation. And of course, we know by such platforms that cooperation is no longer a diplomatic nicety. It is a survival strategy, because cooperation requires a shift in mindset. It means moving away from zero-sum politics and games, where one nation's gain is another nation's loss. So, and to move towards a shared sense of security that recognizes how interconnected our futures have become. Today, we see that peace is not just about ending wars anymore. It's about ensuring food security. It's about regulating technology ethically. It's about addressing climate displacements and protecting human dignity in all its forms. In that sense, peace is no longer passive. It is profoundly active. I often think of young Nigerians and young people around the world that I've mentored, some of whom came from communities that once saw each other as enemies. When they started creating joint community projects, organizing dialogues, and rebuilding trust between themselves, it wasn't just because someone from outside imposed peace on them. It was because they realized that no one wins when everyone is afraid. So that kind of realization, that common ground, is what the new global order must be built on. So maybe the challenge before us today is not simply to create new alliances or institutions, but to rethink what power itself means, to shift from domination to cooperation, and from suspicion to solidarity, and from managing crises to preventing them. So if we, as the next generation of thinkers, if we as the next generation of practitioners can carry that spirit forward, that belief in shared humanity and creative problem solving, then perhaps this new global order might finally live up to its name. So let's not wait for world leaders to define it for us. Let's not build it, let's not forget that we have the power to build this ourselves. One honest conversation, one act of cooperation, one shared project at a time. And maybe, just maybe, here, the words of Nelson Mandela will remind us what's truly at stake. And I end with his quote. He said, "Courageous people do not fear forgiving for the sake of peace." In this new era we are stepping into, peace will require courage, not the courage to fight, but the courage to listen, to forgive, and to rebuild. And with that, I thank you very much for listening, and I yield my time.
Thank you so much, David. That's a very enriching speech as well. I think it's very nice that we have a panel that is so diverse, not only about topics and themes, but also from origins and the perspectives each of you bring from the origin of your studies, of your practices. So I think this is very good for us. I will start with a simple question for all of you. So if you can each make a little comment on that. So we're here in this panel that is about peace, security, cooperation, and this shared sense that David just mentioned on this new global order that we are talking about. So we have now BRICS Plus that is much more diverse. So as Professor Mohammed brought, we have much more Middle East and African countries now joining the cooperation of the sphere of BRICS. And David, he's from Nigeria, and Nigeria is not a current member of BRICS, but it's also a partner of the group. So we have seen this expansion going to this region and bringing us a sense of major diversity and also a focus on this region as well. So we know that China has a different perspective on peace and security. We know that African countries also have different meanings for that, Middle East countries. So I'd like to hear from you in this perspective of a new global order, of a BRICS Plus that is so diverse and so expanded. So now we have many countries that are related to BRICS. How do you see the influence of this diversity in this priorities for peace and security? So, for example, now China has a major influence on other countries on this sphere of BRICS, not from other alliances that it already has. But is China going to influence the sense of peace and security for all these countries? Or the countries that are joining are bringing new perspectives? So how do you see these new approaches to peace and security, considering that now we have a very diverse group that will have to come to a common ground on these topics? And we know that we have like a very diverse group of meanings for that. So if Pedro can speak a little bit, and then Professor Mohammed, and then Davi as well.
Oh, of course. Can I start? Well, okay. So I believe that this diversity that we have right now, it's kind of related to what I just said, about Dion, about interpreting the substance and adapting into a new application, a new form. You see, the whole idea of the community for a shared destiny, for a shared future, is based on that. China is a multi-ethnic state. 56 ethnicities live in China with different levels of autonomy, autonomous regions, provinces, cities. So China has a long tradition, a millennia or old tradition of dealing with different perspectives and accommodating different cultures. I believe that now that moving from the regional, from the global stage, that what is happening right now in front of our eyes, it's just like a further step, in embracing this diversity and moving towards this shared future, shared peace. And even the prospects for security China is presenting right now, together with the BRICS countries, I think we are marching towards that. We are on the right path.
Okay. Thank
That's
you,
it.
Pedro. Professor Mohammed.
Can you hear me? Yeah, that's really a great question or remarks that you have been saying, and I think I totally agree with Pedro on what you have been saying. And of course, as Davi mentioned, also the same in Nigeria. Since I'll be talking about Egypt, which is a part of Africa and the Middle East in general, I think it's BRICS' growing influence right now in the Middle East, particularly with Egypt membership, reflects a major geopolitical shift away from the United States center global dominance toward a more, as I mentioned before, like polar universe. But the idea here also, Egypt at some point need to keep its political stability in a good shape by enhancing its national security based on the let's say the risk that it faced from for example, the illegitimate migration, the instability that causes after the Arab Spring in different countries like Sudan, Libya, Syria, and all others. So that will represent a kind of an important thing. So for Egypt joining BRICS, I think it strengthens its pursuit of strategic autonomy by diversifying the alliances, gaining access to non-Western financing, and reducing dependence on, of course, what we call the dollarization or the US dollar. So this new alignment has a direct implications for national security as it provides Cairo with diverse alternative partners in energy, technology, defense, cybersecurity, in addition to infrastructure, which allow Cairo to balance relationship not only with Washington, but also with Beijing, with Moscow, while advancing its own regional interests. So in a region long shaped by Western intervention and conditional aid, as you guys know, there's always no kind of independent decision in the Middle East to have to be influenced by the international power, specifically from the United States and the European Union countries. BRICS offers Egypt a platform to assert sovereignty and redefine its security strategy on its own terms. Under the Trump administration, I think American foreign policy toward the Middle East prioritized bilateral deals, transactional diplomacy, and pressure on international organizations. Unfortunately, the man in the Oval Office think that he can make deals based on his economic power or based on his business alliances. And his administration, America's first approach, often sidelined multilateral engagement and created space for other powers, especially Russia, China, to expand their influence in the region. And I think this will open an opportunity for BRICS bloc to deepen economic and strategic ties with countries like Egypt, Qatar, United Arab Emirates, Saudi Arabia is important. So I think Egypt's growing involvement with that BRICS alliance is important and represent a response to, and as a result of shifting US posture under the Trump administration, signaling a broader regional move toward balancing American power with emerging global coalition. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Professor. David?
Okay, so very profound speeches from Professor and Pedro. And of course, for me, I will just come from a simple perspective. First, we understand that BRICS is not perfect. BRICS is not the answer to the world's problem today, but it is a step in the right direction. And the growing influence and the growing alliance is actually putting into perspective what we as people within these global frameworks and institutions are supposed to think like and think towards. It is a platform that is now given a new dimension and perspective to what it takes to be in collaboration, especially when it's one that comes from non-exploitative collaborations, if me to use. So it is a growing influence like we've already established, and it shows us something very important. And that is that security today is not only about the absence of war, like I mentioned during my speech, but also the presence of fairness. And when countries decide to collaborate on things like technological transfers, food securities, and other forms of sustainable development, they're in fact strengthening peace in its own self. They are creating the conditions where conflict becomes less attractive because opportunities become more accessible. And that's the deeper lesson I am drawing even from the answers that Professor and Pedro already mentioned. And of course, peace cannot survive in a world where inequality thrives, as we've seen in the unipolar or bipolar world. Now, the professor mentioned the multipolar world. But you know, one of the arguments as it relates to multipolarity is that, you know, just like the idea of polarity is that's or those polar points become like the attracting force where every other institution, organization, country, and people navigate towards. So some people are even of the opinion that the New World Order shouldn't just be one that has specific centers of power, but sees to the equitable distribution of powers within all partners, all institutions that are part of it. And of course, we've seen that clamor, especially even from the African Union, insisting on having a permanent seat on the United Nations Security Council and all that. So as I draw this to a close, BRICS basically pushes for the multipolarity, like I mentioned, for a system that, of course, recognizes diverse perspectives and interests. And it's not just challenging Western dominance, of course, it is expanding the moral imagination of what security and securitization should mean. Because we understand the idea of security dilemma, since we are all experts in international relations. And if we really watch what some of the scholars talk about the security dilemma, we see that the West thinks BRICS is against the West. But just like also some scholars already mentioned, BRICS is not anti-West, it is simply not West. So I think with that being established, it just calls for more collaboration, more diversity, more respect, and more involvement from all stakeholders. And of course, the expansion of BRICS will see to these achievements. Thank you so much.
Thank you all for the comments. I think we have great content here to work on. I'm going to ask another question for all of you, and then I'm going to get the questions from the comment section. So if I noticed one question there already, so if anyone else has a question for speakers, please send on the comment section that we'll address it here. So I think it's very interesting that we have a position on kind of challenging the role of the United States at this point, and with the influence on Africa mostly, because we know that China and the African continent, it has a very deep cooperation in this moment. We have the Silk Road Initiative that it brings a lot of countries together in this, and now we have BRICS Plus, BRICS partners that are not members, but also enhance this kind of relation. And we have new challenges that come with it as well. So, besides having a diversity of perspectives on many topics, we have new challenges that also come as new countries come to the table and to the conversation. So, I think we have a great issue that is going to be more and more approached by BRICS countries, and they do not address it as a peace and security topic, but I've seen that this is becoming a peace and security priority in this moment, and we just had a panel on climate change. So I think climate change today is been going through a process that it's going to be affecting security of people. Not necessarily we're talking about conflict, armed conflict, and defense and technology, but we're talking about humanitarian security. We're talking about how people can live in peace when there are some new challenges that are being brought to the table as climate change. So I'd like to hear from you. What do you think that this new view on climate change as a peace security issue, how can it be addressed by the perspectives we already have on the table from the BRICS countries? And if you think it's a real peace and security issue, or it should be left as a separate issue as it is. I'm saying this because mostly when we're talking about African countries and when we're talking about some Asian countries as well, the climate changes they are bringing a lot of new challenges to these countries and to the peace and security of the population. So I think BRICS right now, besides having it has been approaching climate change, it is not in this sense. So I'd like to hear from you a little bit, and then we can go to the comment section. So we can start with Pedro again, please.
Okay. So regarding climate change, you mentioned that if we agree that it's a security question, I do think it is, right? Because it's something that concerns us all as a planet, as a community as a whole, right? So from the Chinese perspective, what I've learned so far, China has pushed by 2060, they pledged to cut all carbon emissions, and it is a country that is currently investing the most in green solutions, especially electric cars. They are pushing towards green energy, electricity. So in my perspective, I think this issue is being like well addressed, and the recent BRICS Plus partnerships regarding renewable energy, the investments of the new development bank in Brazil for wind turbines, especially wind turbines, we are seeing a lot of initiatives going around. So I believe we can also offer a solution for that.
Okay,
Right.
Pedro, thank
That's
you.
it.
Professor Mohammed?
I mean, to some extent, I'm not an expert in climate change thing. I do some to some extent. I do some work on environmental security within the Islamic perspective. But I guess the BRICS engagement within the Middle East has kind of implication for sure for climate change and environmental security specifically. You know, that part of the world or that region, I guess, will be very impacted by climate change. And we have a president in the White House saying that that's a hoax. I think collaboration within the bloc can support investment when it comes to renewable energy, sustainable infrastructure, and technology transfer, and helping the region reduce reliance on fossil fuels and adapt this kind of water problem. We do have a water problem, as you probably guys know. The security issues in Egypt and Ethiopia, and with the conflict on the water share in the Nile. So I think these kind of risks and extreme weather events will definitely. I think it's a security question, and I think Egypt in particular, this initiative aligned within its security, national security and development goals. And it will provide the platform for Middle Eastern countries to coordinate together. Like Saudi Arabia have a kind of coordination right now. They're creating a committee on climate mitigation and adaptation strategies. UAE tried to share technological expertise and mobilize what we call like financial resources outside the traditional Western frameworks. So I think this collective approach not only contribute to meeting global climate question targets, but also strengthening the strategic autonomy that allows states to address environmental challenges and risks, and to some extent make sure that we're going to have a kind of climate and environmental justice as a part of security. Yeah.
Thank you. David?
Okay, so for me, I think it's one of those ideas that used to sound very abstract, something for environmentalists to worry about. Back then, a lot of us thought like that. But now it's impossible to separate the discussion of climate change and climate crisis from security discussions. Because climate change doesn't just melt ice or melt ice caps or cause droughts. It reshapes currently geopolitics as we've seen it. It redraws coastlines. It forces migration. We can see that it disrupts food and water systems and strains already fragile societies. And when people lose homes, for example, livelihoods, or even access to resources, conflict follows. So yes, I would say climate change is not just an environmental crisis like we used to think. It's a threat multiplier. So that phrase gets thrown around in policy documents a lot. And of course, in policy circles, we hear that a lot of times, but it's very accurate because it makes existing tensions worse. In the Sahel, for instance, we see desertification, we see fuels competition between farmers and herders. I mean, the desertification, this fuels serious in the Sahel. In Nigeria, it happens a lot. And even in Eastern Africa and other parts of Africa, it happens a lot. The competition between farmer herders is unimaginable to the society. It causes lots of food crisis even within these regions and beyond. In the Pacific, we see rising sea levels, and it threatens entire nations. It threatens definitely the sovereignties of these nations to an extent. Even in Europe and in North America, you're seeing the political ripple effects of migration tied to climate stress, and of course, this happens across the continents. There's also a quieter security dimension. And so it's more or less like we need to think a little bit about energy transitions. Countries dependent on fossil fuels, for example, that are facing deep structural change. So this already puts a serious structural change and even strain on the GDP of a country, the economy of the country. And as the world keeps moving towards renewable energy, we see that new dependencies will definitely emerge. Dependencies, we're talking about dependencies on lithium or on cobalt, on rare earth minerals. So the map of power and the vulnerability is shifting again, like as we've seen. So climate in that sense becomes one of the major drivers of both cooperation now and contests. So and at the same time, we can see that climate change could be a pathway to peace if it is handled rightly. Right. And so it means that it will be one of the forces that forces states to cooperate on shared interests, cooperate on water management, on green technologies, on adaptation strategies, because no one can really solve it alone. In some ways, it's the most universal security challenge that we have in the world, and I think it calls for more collaboration than competition, because definitely the climate change is changing the world.
Thank you all. I could be here asking many questions because it's very great to hear your opinions and your analysis. But I'll bring the question from the comment section right now. So the first question we received here is how BRICS can coordinate peace and security joint initiatives focusing Global South's needs in parallel to the UN Security Council. So I'll put it here in our own chat so you can also see the question. But I think it's a broad question, so all of you can also give some comments on that. We can still follow the same order if it's okay for everyone. So we can go to Pedro's perspective on that.
Okay. Well, first of all, as I said, and as everyone here said, Mohammed, David, the BRICS is not a military alliance, right? And it's not intended to become one. So in the same sense of the UN Security Council, I don't see this happening in the same sense. But the BRICS countries, they can coordinate partnerships, technological transfer in the military sector. And this is something that is starting to happen right now, actually. So military training, joint exercises, every year, if I recall correctly, I might be wrong, but I think China and South Africa, they do joint exercises. Russia also joins them. Last year was Russia, China, and Iran. They joined together to do naval exercises. So this kind of partnership, teaching each other about techniques, tactics, this kind of thing, I believe this kind of strategy is possible, like, together with military technology.
Okay, thank you, Pedro. Professor Mohammed?
Interesting question, I guess. I think Egypt can leverage, or in Middle East in general, not only Egypt, BRICS to advance peace and security initiative that reflect the priorities of the Global South by promoting joint conflict prevention, mediation, negotiation, and development-driven security programs. But I think, and also with the humanitarian assistance, we saw that recently on the crisis within Hamas and Gaza war, and I think Egypt can complement the UN Security Council work while ensuring that the perspectives and needs of developing countries are better represented in a global decision making. I think also Egypt can use BRICS as a platform to foster dialogue and cooperation on transnational security threats, such as organized crime, terrorism, and we saw that a lot in the region, and cybercrime, which is totally disproportionately affect the global South country as well. So I think through maybe arranging intelligence sharing training programs and coordinated policy frameworks that may help. The initiative can enhance the regional stability while reinforcing Egypt's role as a mediator and, I guess, security partner, creating a parallel mechanism that support. It would not going to replace the UN Security Council in general, but it could support, give much more support, I guess. That's my thoughts on that. Yeah.
Thank you, David.
So I really cannot add more brilliant to what Professor Mohammed and Pedro have already said. So I'm just going to re-echo some of the things they've mentioned. And first thing is that BRICS can definitely strengthen the peace and security in the global South by building parallel but complementary mechanisms to the United Nations. Basically, try to find the shortcomings of the United Nations and be an institution that fills that gap. So, and of course, this can be done by making sure that BRICS is not focusing on military power, of course, because I mentioned it is not a military alliance, but it can invest in prevention and in resilience. That's, of course, using the new development bank to fund projects that reduce poverty, that reduce climate stress and instability. So a BRICS Peace and Resilience Task Force maybe could help coordinate mediation, to coordinate crisis response and financing, of course, for fragile states. Then we need to also see BRICS create regional hubs that could handle climate, food, and water security, while cyber cooperation would protect probably the digital systems. So these are just some of the thoughts on how probably BRICS could decentralize to make sure that their reach is felt even on the ground and not just at the top level. So of course, the idea is not also to replace the United Nations Security Council, as Professor Mohammed has said, but it will fill the gaps where there is like a gridlock, and offering locally driven, inclusive solutions. So in my final comments, I think that for this to work, BRICS must keep its initiatives very transparent. Transparent in the sense that even its membership process should be something quite transparent, because a lot of people do not understand the yardstick that BRICS uses to include new members, for example. So it needs to keep its initiatives transparent and cooperative and focused on real needs of the global South. So it becomes a partner for peace, not just another geopolitical bloc. So that's basically what I think I can add to what they've already mentioned in brilliance.
Thank you so much. Those comments were very nice. And I think it's interesting if we think that we have two BRICS members on the United Nations Security Council as permanent members. And if maybe there was some interest in bringing some global South needs to the Security Council, maybe they could also have done this with this important role they have there. But BRICS really is not a military alliance, but as you said, some cooperation and some other strengthening in some great teams that go through the security matter can be also an alternative. And also now that we have so many diverse countries on the table and we have this new category of partners, I think we have some things that we can keep in mind to see what comes in the future with these new alliances. So I'd like to thank you all. We don't have more questions on the comment section. Unfortunately, our last speaker could not join us. He had something to solve right now. So I really, really appreciate the presence of Pedro and Professor Mohammed and Davi. It was a delight to hear you all and your comments and your shared knowledge. Thank you for participating in our conference. It was a great pleasure here. And also, I would like to invite everyone because we have still our conference happening at the rest of the week. So tomorrow, Wednesday at 8 a.m., we have a panel on agriculture and food security. And in the second panel of the morning, that is 10:15, we have a panel on technological revolutions in BRICS Plus. So you can also find the links here in the channel that is being streamed. And anyone that wants a participation certificate can also find the attendance list on the comments section. So thank you all again. If you want to do any final remarks, I'll leave it to you as well, so we can follow the same order we've been following the panel. So if you have anything.
No, I just want to say thank you all. It was really great to be here, and I'm really grateful to the invite from Professor Casella. Luna, you have been doing great. Thank you very much for all of the work that you have been putting on. I also wanted to thank Pedro and David for their great remarks. I really learned a lot. So thank you all, and stay in touch. Thank you.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you. I couldn't have said it better. Thank you so much, Professor Mohammed. Thank you, Pedro. Thank you so much, Luana. And it's really my delight to have joined this session and shared notes with each and every one of you.
Well, I would like to say the same. Like, thank you, David. Thank you, Mohammed. Thank you, Luana, for the moderation. And this was awesome. I love the opportunity to be here talking today with you and sharing experiences and learning a lot, of course. I hope the viewers, they also enjoyed today's presentation.
Thank you so much. So thank you for all watching us as well, and we'll be back tomorrow.